LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the September 1st edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like my show, because I picked out the weekend's 12, well actually 13 with the bonus clip, 13 most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. There's no real political comedy. Bill Maher, Saturday Night Live, both off this week, and with hurricane and shooting in Texas being the main topics, not really a joking matter, but there is actually this hurricane joke that I thought actually might be true, that even combines the two stories, sort of, kind of like the title of my video, CROSSFIRE HURRICANE, which has multiple meanings, because first of all, this is the joke that I wanted, the hurricane joke that I actually thought might be true, that I saw on Twitter from Breaking 911. Public service announcement, Florida residents reminded not to open fire on #Hurricane Dorian. But I did some research on that, and you saw there's this whole graphic there where it like shows how actually CROSSFIRE HURRICANE, right? That's if you shoot into hurricane, you get hurricane crossfire, maybe. Well, CROSSFIRE HURRICANE is actually a quote from the Rolling Stones song Jumpin' Jack Flash, I think, as someone pointed out in the comment section before I started the show. And it's also, there was some news this week about James Comey and the Inspector General report on what he did with his memos, and there's supposed to be a bigger Inspector General report about the origins of the Russia investigation into the Trump campaign, and the code name for the Russia investigation, also CROSSFIRE HURRICANE. But with a shooting and a hurricane this week, CROSSFIRE HURRICANE is kind of the dueling news stories from all the big five corporate outlets, and that you'll see that the shooting and the hurricane and CROSSFIRE HURRICANE, the James Comey Inspector General investigation, were all parts of the top stories, and the trade war, which made it onto a couple channels, and I'll have a little bit about that coming up. But on the hurricane, only 3 of the 5 corporate news outlets mentioned the way climate change, even though no particular hurricane can be blamed on climate change, the warmer water does increase the strength of hurricanes. And you'll see later Trump saying it's like, this is the biggest hurricane ever. He loves to make everything the biggest, but one of the reasons may be because of climate change, and that was mentioned on only 3 of the 5 shows. 2 by the anchors and 1 by, you'll see Beto O'Rourke brought it up on CBS's Face of the Nation. And then at the end, I also have a additional topic, the 2020 Democratic presidential candidate update. It's Biden gaffes were a topic again this week when he messed up some details on this story about a soldier who didn't want a medal pinned on him because the person he saved died. And you'll see Meet the Press covers that more extensively, puts it in the context of Biden's gaffes versus Trump's lies. ABC doesn't do quite as good a job, but they do give a slight preview of the upcoming ABC debate on September 12th, which is down to the top 10 candidates. I'll discuss all that in the last few clips at the end, but I want to start with the news summaries about CROSSFIRE HURRICANE, the shooting, and the hurricane that is pounding the Bahamas right now, possibly going to hit Florida. And you'll see that summarized. This is the teaser from Fox News Sunday, where, like I said, they're the only ones to mention the James Comey CROSSFIRE HURRICANE story, although they don't say CROSSFIRE HURRICANE in this clip.
I'm Chris Wallace. Another deadly mass shooting in Texas, and tracking Hurricane Dorian. Millions in the storm's path as the powerful storm heads for the U.S. mainland.
Don't make any assumptions. remain vigilant and be prepared.
States of emergency declared in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas as residents get ready and get out of the way. President Trump canceling a trip overseas to monitor the potentially monster storm.
This is not looking good, and it's one of the biggest hurricanes we've seen in a long time.
We'll have live reports on the ground and get an update on the federal response from FEMA Acting Administrator Pete Gaynor. And we'll discuss the threat to those in the storm's path with Florida Senator Rick Scott. Then,
America's workers aren't interested in little slivers of change.
On this Labor Day weekend, the impact of the president's trade war with China. We'll sit down with AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka. It's a Fox News Sunday exclusive. Plus,
I thought the IG report was incredible, but I have total confidence in Bill Barr to do the right thing.
we'll ask our Sunday panel about the fallout from the IG report, sharply criticizing former FBI Director James Comey. All right now on Fox News Sunday. And hello again from Fox News in Washington. We are following two breaking stories today. We'll have the latest on Hurricane Dorian, which is making its way towards the southeast U.S. and has now strengthened into a fierce Category 5 storm. But first, at least 5 are dead and more than 20 injured in another mass shooting in Texas. A gunman opened fire seemingly at random after a traffic stop. Mike Tobin has the latest from Odessa, Texas.
So Fox News Sunday did do the shooting story there. They mentioned it briefly at the beginning, and then in their news summary, it wasn't really mentioned at all in the teaser, and then the summary till the very end there, and then they go to Mike Tobin, who gives some facts on that. But I think that they gave less coverage to the shooting in Texas than any of the other 4 corporate outlets. I don't know if that's to make it seem like less of a crisis, put less pressure on legislators and the president to come up with some sort of legislative fix. But I will have some clips on the problem with too many guns and some clips on the climate change, like I said. But I want to contrast that news summary. This is a very brief news summary. NBC News' Meet the Press, Chuck Todd. It, like I said at the end, if you're, by the way, down in the video description, you can see a link to my clip list of my 12 clips. Although, like I said, there's a bonus clip that's going to come up after CNN State of the Union, and you'll see clip 10 down here is the NBC News Meet the Press news summary of Biden versus Trump, gaffes versus lies, and that's like a pre-recorded package. I think that was supposed to be the package, because you'll see it's where is that one? That's almost 4 minutes long, and you know how Chuck Todd usually starts the show with a brief introduction about the breaking news and then goes to the package. Well, the package didn't fit the shooting and the hurricane, so it came later in the program, and I will show it, like I said, clip 10 coming up. But here is the brief news summary about the breaking news from NBC News' Meet the Press this morning here.
Good Sunday morning on this difficult Labor Day weekend. We're going to get to all the political news in just a moment, but we're going to begin with 2 big stories. The mass shooting in Midland and Odessa, Texas, and Hurricane Dorian. Let's start with the shooting. It happened yesterday afternoon when a man fled a traffic stop near Midland, hijacked a mail truck, and started shooting people at random in Odessa. 5 people were killed, 21 wounded before police eventually killed the shooter, a white man in his 30s. Our own Garrett Hake is in Odessa. We're going to turn now to Hurricane Dorian, whose erratic path has been confounding forecasters, leaving residents on the Atlantic coast from Florida to the Carolinas preparing for whatever comes their way. Let me go now to WNBC meteorologist Maria LaRosa in New York with the latest on the storm's path. And Maria, it is one of those things everybody sees now. The general path makes it look like we're going to duck this. Are we that confident?
And she seemed a little pained by that question, but she kind of said they were going to duck it. And but the cone of uncertainty shows it may still hit Florida. Right now, like I said, it's pounding the Bahamas. Maybe by the time you're watching this, you'll know whether it's going to hit Florida. but it's gonna like stall out very close to Florida, and when it moves very slowly, it's harder to predict where it's gonna go, and this Hurricane Dorian, could be lasting all the way till like next Friday on the East Coast, and so we could be getting a lot of coverage on that. The next news summary I want to show is from CNN's State of the Union, where Dana Bash was in for Jake Tapper this week. And so, CNN State of the Union, at least where I am in California, the Pacific time it shows at 6 a.m. and then 9 a.m. on Sundays. And usually the 9 a.m. version is just a repeat of the recorded version from 6 a.m. And if you look down in the bottom right corner of the show, it doesn't say live for the replay. Sometimes they do some live stuff in the replay at 9 a.m. and the clip I'm about to show is the news summary from the 9 a.m. version. It says live, and it's actually different from the 6 a.m. version. They flipped. In the 6 a.m. version, they had like the shooting first and the hurricane second. Here you'll see it's still the same. State of our Union is on the edge. And then they do the hurricane and then the gun story. But what is kind of unjournalistic, kind of like fake news from CNN, is that in the 9 a.m. version, they had some new live content, but they replayed all the newsmaker interviews from the 6 a.m. version, but they kept showing that little live thing in the bottom right corner, like over here. If you watch, it says live when I show this clip, and they kept showing that even when they were replaying interviews from 3 hours ago. And at first I thought that was a mistake, but because they were like intertwining live and new stuff. But actually I think it might have been a business decision to just keep that little live thing up in the corner here, so that, because when there's like breaking news, people want to watch live and they don't want to watch recorded interviews. But anyway, this was the news summary from CNN State of the Union, which was fine, but I've explained what I thought that CNN did that was kind of fake news today, which I don't have to discuss with you after we watch. Oh, and you'll see, because in the 9 a.m. version, it actually corresponded with some departing remarks arriving remarks from President Trump returning to the White House, where he says this is like the biggest storm ever, although actually it is kind of a big storm, which I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
In for Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is on edge. With every hour, Hurricane Dorian is growing even more powerful as it threatens the southeastern coast. The Category 5 hurricane has now become the strongest storm to hit anywhere on the planet this year. And Americans all the way from Florida up to the Carolinas are preparing for hurricane-force winds and storm surges as Dorian's track shifts slightly back towards the U.S. coast. But I want to begin today with the same way we did 4 weeks ago, today. And that is with news of another tragedy, more lives lost in a horrific mass shooting. The death toll is now up to 7. 7 people killed and more than 20 injured yesterday in West Texas after a man went on a shooting rampage through the streets of Midland and Odessa. President Trump just spoke outside the White House about the shooting and the hurricane. Let's listen.
First of all, I'd like to thank law enforcement yesterday in Texas. They've been incredible. First responders, law enforcement, the police, the FBI, Governor Abbott, incredible the job they did. It's tragic, but they did an incredible job under the circumstances. It's another very sick person. So I just want to thank everybody involved. And always you say, as bad as it was, it could have been worse. But it was certainly bad. Very, very sad situation. Also, I'd like to introduce Admiral Brown of the U.S. Coast Guard, a highly respected man. We spent 2 days at Camp David going over a lot of different things having to do with the hurricane. The Admiral's informed me through all of the different sources that he has, but you can pretty much get it on television, Admiral. This is now a Category 5. It seems to be one of the biggest hurricanes we've ever seen. And that's a problem. That's a problem. So I think we have a lot of great,
The biggest hurricane we've ever seen. Actually, it's one of the largest in the Atlantic Basin in terms of wind speed. It actually is a pretty big hurricane. And so what Trump said there isn't as ridiculous as a lot of his biggest ever claims. But then I noticed CNN State of the Union, later they broke in at the end of their 9 to 10 a.m. hour, which is noon to 1 p.m. on the East Coast, to catch this Trump getting briefed by FEMA and Department of Homeland Security about the hurricane, but they missed the beginning part where he said something actually ridiculous about nobody's ever heard of Category 5 hurricanes before, and that's the bonus clip. That's, if you're following along on the clip list, this is an audible. This is a bonus clip I've added. It's also public domain, so I don't have to shrink it down for copyright reasons. It's about 30 seconds of Trump saying that nobody's ever heard of a Category 5, except, we knew it was a category, but there's never been a Category 5, which is obviously not true, but not like we expect truth from our president, which I'll discuss with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
And we will work very hard to minimize whatever the effect of what's coming at us. We don't even know what's coming at us. All we know is it's possibly the biggest. I'm not sure that I've ever even heard of a Category 5. I knew it existed, and I've seen some Category 4s. You don't even see them that much, but a Category 5 is something that I don't know that I've ever even heard the term, other than I know it's there. That's the ultimate, and that's what we have, unfortunately.
So I had actually heard of a Category 5, but I'm not President of the United States, so maybe I'm privy to some special knowledge that presidents of the United States... No, this actually kind of fits into the clips I'm going to show at the end about Trump's lies versus Biden's gaffes, although Trump has a bunch of gaffes too. I don't know why. Well, I'll talk about that more when I get to clips 10, 11, and 12 at the end. But the next clip I want to show is actually the final news summary. This is, I think, similar to the rest of them. You'll see Martha Raddatz call this a monster storm. And the thing that she says about the track of the storm is kind of what I was saying before, that the only thing consistent about this storm is its inconsistency. I heard a whole bunch of variations of that sentiment, that even though it looks like it's not going to hit Florida and might turn north and not hit land until South Carolina or North Carolina at a much lower wind velocity, like Category 2 or Category 1 Thursday or Friday. But one thing about this storm that you'll hear Martha Raddatz say here is that it's one consistent thing is its inconsistency. And I will talk about that news summary and a little more. This is the final news summary before I get to some newsmaker clips. And I'll talk about it a little more with you after we watch together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. Millions of Americans are on alert this Labor Day weekend, trading their plans for outdoor barbecues with intense preparations for an incredibly powerful Category 5 hurricane that forecasters are calling a monster. As with any forecast, Hurricane Dorian's track has been in a state of flux, though this storm has been particularly erratic. One emergency management official saying the only thing consistent about this storm has been its inconsistency. This morning, President Trump, who canceled a trip to Poland to remain in the U.S. monitoring the storm, will visit the National Response Coordination Center to receive briefings from federal emergency managers who are preparing for Dorian's impact. I was there this morning and spoke with the acting Homeland Security Secretary and the acting FEMA administrator, but we begin this morning with a different emergency. Another deadly shooting in West Texas, leaving at least 5 dead. While it doesn't appear pre-planned, it's equally, if not more, terrifying. A routine traffic stop turning into a suspect with a fully loaded weapon wreaking havoc. ABC News chief national correspondent Matt Gutman is on the scene in Odessa, Texas, with the latest in the...
And everybody had reports from Odessa, Texas. I think, excuse me, the one other thing I thought was good about the ABC report there is that they emphasized how this Texas shooting was not pre-planned. It was a routine traffic stop gone awry, which means that I mean, it's just another way that a mass shooting can end up happening that people hadn't thought of, or I don't know. Is that fact an important fact or just an extraneous fact? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And now I want to get to some of the newsmakers. I have 2 on the gun issue and 3 on the climate issue before I get to the Democratic presidential candidate update and the Biden gaffes versus Trump lies topic at the end. So on the gun issue, first I want to show Beto O'Rourke on CNN State of the Union talking to Dana Bash, where this is actually the live version, which they replayed later as a recorded version, but still showed that it was live. Over in the corner here. Sorry. But one reason it's important that it's live is because they show a clip of Beto O'Rourke reacting to this latest West Texas shooting, and he uses the F-bomb in the clip, and then he actually follows up using the F-bomb in, you'll see they don't even bleep it on CNN, and they didn't bleep it in the replay even though they could have. There was like this weird sound gap, which I'm not showing you the replay clip. It's like they tried to bleep it, but they bleeped like the silence after he said the F-bomb. But anyway, I'm going to show you the bleeped and unbleeped F-bomb. Beto O'Rourke, I guess, trying to get attention for his campaign by using profanity about the situation involving mass shootings. Not like the F-bomb isn't warranted, but as you know, I'm not a big Beto O'Rourke fan, but I can't disagree with a lot of the things he's saying here. Although I will talk about the mandatory buyback program a little bit after we watch this CNN State of the Union clip from this morning over here.
On the shooting, I want to play for our viewers your reaction at a campaign stop last night.
Don't know what the motivation is, do not yet know the firearms that were used or how they acquired them. But we do know this is up. Yeah. We do know.
Yeah, the rhetoric that we've used, the thoughts and prayers that you just referred to, it has done nothing to stop the epidemic of gun violence, to protect our kids, our families, our fellow Americans in public places, at a Walmart in El Paso where 22 were killed, in Sutherland Springs in a church, 1 or 2 a day all over this country, 100 killed daily in the United States of America. We're averaging about 300 mass shootings a year. No other country comes close. So yes, this is fucked up. And if we don't call it out for what it is, if we're not able to speak clearly, if we're not able to act decisively, then we will continue to have this kind of bloodshed in America. And I cannot accept that. And so we're going to speak as defiantly and as strongly as we can, but we're also going to take action. Universal background checks, red flag laws, and into the sales of weapons of war and buying those AK-47s and AR-15s back so that they cannot be used against our fellow Americans.
So let's talk more about some of those solutions. You made an unusual campaign stop.
And down in the video description, you can see the entire CNN State of the Union program, I think, at a link I put down there. And you can see him talk more about how he went to a gun show and found people who actually weren't all that upset about having to have background checks based on their gun purchases. But that mandatory buyback, that's probably like a bridge too far for most... well, not most, but for a significant part of the American public. I mean, I don't think it's such a bad idea personally where you know, there are these weapons of war on our streets or semi-automatic rifles that have these high-velocity, large-caliber bullets that wreak havoc on people in, you know, many people in a crowd very quickly. And, you know, what is the point of having a weapon like that? And the only way to get rid of them is to require people to sell them back to the government, which is what Beto O'Rourke is proposing there. But one of the big NRA scare tactics is saying, they're coming for our guns, and that's just the kind of, mandatory buyback that is basically they're coming for our guns. Not all our guns, but just these specific guns, the assault weapons, as they're called by some people. But whether you think that's a good idea or not, you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And before I get to my 3 climate clips, I want to have one more gun clip. This is the acting director of Homeland Security. A lot of people in the Trump administration seem to be acting, and people, especially the acting administrator of FEMA, was asked about whether there was a problem with him being the deputy who was just the acting administrator, and he said no on multiple programs, and I'm not going to show that. But here's the acting secretary of the Department of Homeland Security answering an important question from Martha Raddatz about whether these mass shootings, so many mass shootings that you just saw Beto O'Rourke use profanity about, whether they're actually a Homeland Security issue, and the answer is yes, although what they're going to do about it, I don't know about, but here's Kevin McAleenan, acting secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, answering that question on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning over here.
Aggressively.
There have been more than 50 people killed in mass shootings this month alone.
Right.
Should we consider these shootings a Homeland Security threat?
They absolutely are a Homeland Security threat. In our counterterrorism strategy and approach, domestic terrorism has taken a frontline focus for us. Since April, when I've become acting secretary, we set up a new office, Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention, with an explicit focus and balance on domestic terrorism, including racially motivated violent extremism, which we've seen much too much of in the recent weeks and months.
Should DHS be devoting more resources to?
And down in the video description, you can see Martha Raddatz ask Kevin McAleenan about whether Department of Homeland Security should be putting more resources against mass shootings, and he says, "Oh yeah, we're putting so many resources, so many," but I don't know. It seems like they keep happening, and I like you saw that was a pre-recorded interview, but it didn't say live on ABC because she said there have been 50 people killed in mass shootings this month, and this month wasn't, it's September 1st when that was airing, but she's actually talking about August. That's why I have the hashtag Guns of August, which is this great novel from the 60s, I think, about World War I, but apparently guns in America killed 50 people in mass shootings in August 2019. A different kind of Guns of August, but it's apparently a Homeland Security issue. Thanks to Martha Raddatz for getting that answer from Kevin McAleenan, the acting Homeland Security Secretary. And this next clip is the first of 3 clips on climate, and this is the acting administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and this is Dana Bash asking about the research that I was talking about earlier, that warm water, because of climate change, increases the intensity of hurricanes, and if that's true. And you'll see that Peter Gaynor, the acting administrator of FEMA, kind of dodges the question, saying, oh, well, if you look over the last 25 years, we've had more hurricanes, but he doesn't say why. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Researchers say that we're going to see even more very intense hurricanes due to the climate crisis. Do you agree with that?
You can look through the history of the past 25 years or so. There's been more hurricanes, more intensity. Again, I think we can look to that at another date. But I think the message today is for residents, especially with the new Cat 5, is don't take your eye off this storm. Take the time to prepare now. It's going to be with us for a long time, long duration. And again, now is the time to prepare yourself and your family for anything that may happen.
All right. Well, we will be keeping in touch with you. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's a very...
So he definitely dodged that question about climate change. And in this next clip I want to show you from Fox, that was CNN. They were one of the 3 corporate outlets that actually mentioned climate change in regard to the hurricane. The third one, CBS, the anchor didn't mention it. It was their newsmaker guest, Beto O'Rourke, who brings it up. So they don't really get credit for that. So it's really only 2, one of which was CNN. You just saw where Dana Bash brought up the researchers who show that warmer waters make more intense hurricanes. Chris Wallace, at least he gets some credit for bringing it up when he's talking to Rick Scott, the former governor of Florida, now senator from Florida. But when he brings it up, he doesn't mention researchers or science. He just says, doesn't it feel like the warmer water's making more hurricanes? Kind of feels like that's happening. And Rick Scott says, well, climate always changes. And the other thing about Rick Scott in this clip, I think Rick Scott has decided that wearing a hat makes him look less like a reptile. So watch this clip, and if you're not interested in any of the Fox News bias on climate change I was just talking about, tell me if you think Rick Scott looks less like a reptile when he's wearing a hat in this clip. And I'll talk about all of that a little more after. And this is just, you saw that last clip was 42 seconds on climate change on CNN. This is 59 seconds on climate change on Fox News Sunday over here.
One of the reasons it seems that Dorian keeps growing is because it's traveling over so much warm water as it heads across the Caribbean, getting closer now to the Florida mainland. You have expressed mixed feelings over the years about climate change and about the role that human activity plays, but it sure seems like these hurricanes are getting bigger, stronger, more intense. Do you see a connection?
Well, first off, we know climate's changing, and we know our storms seem to be getting bigger. I mean, just in what the last 4 years as governor, I had 4 of them. Now we have them my first year out as governor. So we don't know what the cause is, but we've got to react to it. So as governor, I mean, we put money into dealing with things like sea level rise, more mitigation, and things like that. So we've got to continue to figure this out.
As a senator, is it a relief not to be in charge, not to be at ground zero?
And you see the follow-up question there had nothing to do with research there and nothing about pinning him down on whether, climate changes, but is it changing in a way that intensifies hurricanes? He just said, it seems like the warmer water is making the hurricanes worse. But like I said, 59 seconds there from Fox News Sunday. 42 seconds before that on CNN State of the Union devoted to climate change, even with this huge, biggest ever hurricane, as Trump said, barreling down on Florida after looks like it's devastating the Bahamas. And then the final mention of climate change, the third of the 5 corporate outlets that mentioned climate change was CBS, but it wasn't Margaret Brennan. She never brought it up. It was Beto O'Rourke answering a question about hurricane preparedness, and then he actually brought it up again when Margaret Brennan brought up the trade war with China, and I've edited those 2 clips together in the just under 2-minute clip from CBS's Face the Nation that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
I want to ask you as well, though, about the other gathering storm, the Category 5 hurricane that's headed towards the United States. When you look at the kind of federal preparedness we have now, is there something as president you would change about it, or do you think the system is ready to go?
I'm really disappointed that President Trump has proposed taking money from FEMA in the middle of hurricane season for walls or cages or militarization of the border that we do not need. As president, I would fully fund FEMA. I would invest in the resiliency of communities in Florida and Georgia, the Carolinas, and Puerto Rico to make sure that they're ready for the next storm, because the scientists have told us these storms are only going to become more frequent, more devastating, and more deadly as the climate continues to change. So the immediate priority is helping those in the path of these storms, but the longer-term goal is to confront climate change before it's too late, free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, and fully embrace renewable energy and get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions as soon as humanly possible, no later than the year 2050. We've got to do all of that if we're going to meet this challenge.
You rolled out your trade policy this week. New tariffs on China go into place today. Is there a situation where President O'Rourke would ever use tariffs?
As a last resort. I mentioned climate change earlier. This could be the platform for us to get the necessary concessions from trading partners to ensure that we don't warm this planet another 1.5 degrees Celsius. Trade deals could be the platform by which we ensure the dignity of working women and men all over the world, make sure they're paid a fair wage and have working conditions that are safe for them. And it's also a way to make sure that we protect the human rights of our fellow human beings all over the planet. These are our values in this country. Let's use our trade deals to achieve them and make sure that we never do that at the expense of the American worker or the American farmer or the American economy.
So there you have Beto O'Rourke being the only one to mention climate change on CBS's Face the Nation this morning, making it the third of the big 5 corporate outlets to mention climate change, but only because the Democratic presidential candidate guest mentioned it, not the host. And you saw the Fox News Sunday and CNN State of the Union very brief mentions of climate change, even though we have this huge, perhaps biggest ever Category 5 hurricane destroying or pummeling the Bahamas as we speak, and on its way possibly to the coast of Florida or off the coast of Florida. That remains to be seen. And anyway, those were the climate change on Hurricane Dorian clips that I wanted to show you before I get to now the final topic. This is my 2020 presidential candidate update. And before I get to the clips about Biden's gaffes versus Trump's lies, or maybe just Biden's gaffes, and the 3 frontrunners for the Democratic presidential nomination all being over 70, that was a topic covered by NBC News' Meet the Press, and in a much more cursory way by ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But I just wanted to mention that the next debate is from ABC. The Democratic debate is on September 12th, which I will be trying to cover with a live clip roundup. But I'm also planning to make a edited, produced video sometime this week titled Bill Maher. This is the tentative title, which I may change, but it's titled Bill Maher Predicted 80% of Top 10 Democratic Presidential Candidates, because if you see these 10 candidates here, back at the end of June, I think it was June 28th maybe, HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher did this segment that I showed on my Sunday live clip roundup, where he threw away 10 of the 20 candidates, and he got it 80% right. And I'm planning to make an edited, produced video about that. I'm going to preview it for my Patreon patrons. There's a link down in the video description where you can become a Patreon patron, and I will give them a draft of the video for at least 24 hours before I release it, or feature it probably Thursday or Friday of this week. I will release it or feature it. But one thing, in addition to the top 10 presidential candidates being picked by the ABC criteria, I wanted to show you a few clips here about the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates. First, I want to show you NBC News' Meet the Press did this, I think, public service by putting Joe Biden's gaffes in the context of Donald Trump's lies, which the next clip I show you from ABC doesn't do. But like I said, I think this is the package that NBC News' Meet the Press had prepared to show as their news summary at the beginning of the show until the shooting in Texas and the hurricane coming towards Florida sort of rejiggered their priorities. And but here's, I think, what was supposed to be the big story. The Biden gaffes versus Trump lies competition in the almost 4-minute news package that NBC News' Meet the Press showed later in the program that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Welcome back. This was supposed to be the year of generational change in American politics, particularly for the Democrats. With far more millennials and Gen Xers now than baby boomers, and with the voting population becoming more diverse, you might expect the leading presidential candidates to look something like the people electing them. Instead, we very well could wind up with a presidential matchup between Donald Trump, who was born at the start of the baby boom era and will be 74 on Election Day, and Joe Biden, who is too old to be classified as a baby boomer and will be 77 on Election Day, just 2 weeks shy of turning 78. And let's say Biden doesn't make it. Right behind him are Elizabeth Warren, who will be 71, and Bernie Sanders, who will be 78 and was born before Pearl Harbor. All came of age in their 20s during the age of Aquarius. But the age of Aquarius itself is 50 years old. For Biden, whispers about his age have grown louder, especially given some recent verbal faceplants. But the question is, in the age of Trump, is it possible to have the Biden gaffe conversation without having the Trump lies conversation?
Do you have a reaction on the war hero? All right, we got to go, guys. Thank you so much. Do details matter, Mr. Vice President?
Joe Biden defending a war story he has told on the trail to a Washington Post podcast on Thursday.
I don't know what the problem is. I mean, what is it that I said wrong?
Biden said he was in Afghanistan as vice president when he was asked to pin a silver star on a Navy captain.
He said, sir, I don't want the damn thing. Do not put it on me, sir. Please, sir. Do not do that. He died. He died.
But as the Washington Post reports, almost every detail of that story appears to be incorrect. It's the latest verbal slip-up in a campaign that's already full of them.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids, black kids, Asian kids.
In New Hampshire last Saturday, Biden told reporters,
"What's not to like about Vermont?"
Biden has been gaffe-prone for decades. President Trump, just 3 years younger than Biden, has made his own mistakes.
May God bless the memory of those who perished in Toledo.
But he is trying to make Biden's age an issue.
Joe Biden has truly lost his fastball.
But do Biden's gaffes, verbal slip-ups, and conflations matter in the age of a president who lies? According to a count by the Washington Post, President Trump has made more than 12,000 false and misleading statements since taking office. In just the past month, on the border wall.
The wall is well under construction. It's being built at a rapid pace.
On the economy.
Yesterday, we had the strongest dollar in the history of our country.
On family separations.
I am the one that kept the families together, okay? You remember that, right?
On ISIS.
We wiped out the caliphate 100%. I did it in record time.
Even on his wife and Kim Jong-un, who the White House now says have never met.
First Lady has gotten to know Kim Jong-un, and I think she'd agree with me.
Last December, Biden told a crowd, I am a gaffe machine, but my God, what a wonderful thing compared to a guy who can't tell the truth.
I think he's just an ideal candidate, despite the fact that he makes gaffes. He's a human being, and that comes through.
While his gaffes may not matter to voters, some of Biden's opponents are already, indirectly, making the case that his age should.
People are looking for a new generation of leadership.
We got to put together a picture of what America will look like, how we're going to fix things, not looking backwards and saying, wasn't it nice when?
But with the top 3 Democrats all 70 or older, it's not clear that, so far, Democratic voters are listening.
I'd say if they're concerned, don't vote for me.
And joining me now from San Antonio is former housing secretary and Democratic presidential candidate, former mayor of San Antonio, by the way, Julián Castro. Secretary Castro.
And I will have that a Julián Castro clip for my final news clip in just a minute before the bonus Dash and Sandy clip for the Dash and Sandy clip fans out there. But I want to contrast that almost 4-minute news summary about Joe Biden's gaffes, putting them in the context of Donald Trump's lies, although there are also a lot of gaffes in there from Donald Trump where it seems like he's saying things that aren't true by mistake. And I actually think the Trump campaign, by making it gaffes versus lies, is trying, you saw Donald Trump saying, he's old, he's missing a step, and I think that may be in this next news summary from ABC News's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, of course, hosted by Martha Raddatz this week, where, in some ways, that's the way that Trump can make gaffes seem worse than lies, because lies are at least intentional. You're not like getting so old that you can't remember things and you're confused, and that's why you're making gaffes. Although, as Chuck Todd pointed out in that last news summary, Joe Biden has been making gaffes for a long, long time, so it's not really a matter of his age. But at least NBC News' Meet the Press put the gaffes in the context of the lies, and a lot of, like, the Washington Post did a news story this week that on the gaffes that didn't really talk about the lies that much, and here you'll see ABC News did a story on the gaffes really without mentioning the lies at all, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch it together, before I show you the final Julián Castro news clip, which we will also watch together and talk about after we watch this clip together over here.
My word is abiding. He stood at attention. I went to pin him. I said, sir, I don't want the damn thing. Do not pin it on me, sir. Please, sir. Do not do that. He died. He died.
There's a story by my colleague at the Washington Post, Matt Visor. The headline, as he campaigns for president, Joe Biden tells a moving but false war story.
I was making the point how courageous these people are, how incredible they are. This generation of warriors, these fallen angels we've lost. And so that, I don't know what the problem is.
Joe Biden attracting attention for all the wrong reasons this week. We're going to discuss that and much more this morning with our roundtable. ABC News political analyst Matthew Dowd, Washington Post national correspondent Mary Jordan, Asma Khalid, political correspondent for National Public Radio, and ABC News political director Rick Klein. Good morning to all of you. And Rick, I got to start with you because we're all very excited here at ABC. The big debate on September 12th on ABC, 10 candidates on the stage. Walk us through the stage, how that was done. What's your take on all of this?
It's an inflection point in the race because you have all of the candidates on one stage at one time for them.
And it's definitely an inflection point in the race, and I just kept it playing there so I could grab that last image there of the last image of the top 10 presidential candidates that I showed you earlier. And that's going to definitely be interesting to watch. But like I said, I think that NBC did a better job of putting the Biden gaffes in the context of Trump gaffes and lies. There are also gaffes there where it seems like Trump is confused, not to mention what he said about Category 5 hurricanes and many other things. Like, who knew? Like, we all knew. I don't know why Trump is just figuring some of this stuff out. But the final news clip I want to show you is Julián Castro responding to that first point that they made in the NBC News Meet the Press news package there about how the top 3 Democrats right now, Biden, Warren, and Sanders, are all in their 70s, and what that says about the need for a new generation of Democratic leaders like Julián Castro. And of course, he does not attack Biden. He does not attack... There's no, like, age discrimination in his answer, but there is sort of a subtle argument in favor of a younger perspective in the final news clip that we can watch together from NBC News' Meet the Press. Chuck Todd talking to Julián Castro over here.
At least that. Let me turn now to the presidential race. Simple question. Are you surprised that the Democratic Party of today, that the three front runners right now are all over the age of 70?
I don't know if surprised is the right word. First of all, the folks that you're talking about are very talented individuals with tremendous experience. But what I hear out there and what I think is going to show itself as we get closer and closer to the Iowa caucus is that people do want a new generation of leadership. And, you know, for Democrats that are out there, what I hear is a lot of anxiety about, hey, we need to beat Donald Trump. How are we going to beat Donald Trump? Well, if you take a look at the modern era of presidential campaigns, when Democrats have won, it's because they've taken a bit of a risk, whether it was Kennedy in 1960 or Carter in 1976 or Barack Obama in 2008. And we need to get people off the sidelines in 2020. I believe that I can, you know, reassemble the Obama coalition and then supercharge that so that we can go back and win Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and then also get the 29 electoral votes of Florida, the 11 electoral votes of Arizona, and I believe even the 38 electoral votes of Texas. I'll just say, Chuck, that, you know, the other day I was in Iowa and I met a young woman who said that she was going to turn 18 before the Iowa caucus, and she said, I'm excited to get registered to vote and to go and caucus for you. Those are the kinds of things that I'm hearing out there among young people. If we're going to win this election, we're going to have to get young people involved and get people off the sidelines.
If Joe Biden's the nominee, do you have any concerns?
Well, I think that Joe Biden would be a much better president, of course, than Donald Trump. If I didn't think that I would be a better president, I wouldn't be running this race. But I think that he would be a much better president.
Big smile from Julián Castro there. But he doesn't attack Biden. He doesn't attack Biden's age. There's just sort of a subtle dig there on, you know, the new generation that, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I actually like Julián Castro. I like what he did with his plan to combat problems with policing and mass incarceration that you can read about in the new Jim Crow, especially getting rid of qualified immunity for police officers. I think that was a genius policy, even if he's not going to be the presidential nominee of the Democrats. I've mentioned many times about how the primaries are both about finding the candidate, but also finding policies that don't necessarily come from the winning Democratic nominee. A bunch of other candidates can suggest policies that end up being winning policies. Julián Castro, like I said, talked about getting rid of qualified immunity for police officers, talked about getting rid of the misdemeanor crime of illegally crossing the border, turning that into an infraction. That's 18 U.S.C. 1325 that he made a big issue in previous debates. So I'm glad that Julián Castro has qualified for the debates. And like I said, that's the last news clip I want to show you. Before I get to the bonus Dash and Sandy clip, I want to thank those people who supported my video through Super Chat. The YouTube advertising guidelines say that I shouldn't talk about mass shootings. I shouldn't talk about natural disasters like Hurricane Dorian. And I think putting the words Crossfire Hurricane in my title may mean that my video won't get monetized at all this week. Last week it did. The 2 previous weeks when I was talking about the El Paso shooting, not only got demonetized, but on appeal remained demonetized. Last week got demonetized, but on appeal got monetized. So now it is monetized. But anyway, if you want to help support my videos, down at a link in the video description, you can become a monthly patron on Patreon, or I appreciate the Super Chat contributors. I had 3 of them this week here. Thank you, Sexy Bob, Lulu Girl, and Mary Waney, especially those last 2 about Labor Day. I'm definitely a pro-worker person. not a democratic socialist, but definitely someone who believes in the rights of workers. And so I appreciate those Super Chat contributions. I appreciate people who give me direct contributions through PayPal. By the way, if you give me a $5 contribution on PayPal or a monthly contribution on Patreon at the $5 level at links down in the video description, you get this weatherproof, weather-resistant vinyl sticker, #LiberalViewer sticker at the $5 level. At the $10 level, you get this ACLU Constitution and the sticker, which I can send anywhere in the world. If you contribute $5 on PayPal or $10 on PayPal for those two levels, or on Patreon, I will get you those anywhere in the world pretty much. So that's in addition to the Super Chat contributions. And then before I finish, for the Dash and Sandy fans out there, here is a Dash and Sandy clip that I created by getting Dash closer to me than Sandy, and then saying, "Sandy, come," and making Sandy comes towards me and making Dash react to Sandy. Dash is the cat, Sandy is the dog. I don't know where Dash is, but Sandy's right there sleeping as my, right to my left as usual. But anyway, here's the bonus Dash and Sandy clip for the Dash and Sandy fans tonight over here. Sandy, come. So that's it for tonight. I hope you appreciate the clips I picked out for you all. I hope you appreciate my commentary and criticism on both the media news summaries and the newsmaker clips. I will be back next Sunday and every Sunday for the foreseeable future, at least through the 2020 election. And like I said, I will be putting out a edited, produced video tentatively titled "Bill Maher predicted 80% of top 10 Democratic presidential candidates." I'll be previewing a draft of that to my Patreon patrons on Wednesday or Thursday for at least 24 hours, and then either scheduling it or premiering it as a live video on Thursday or Friday for everyone else. So look forward to that. And then I'll be back next Sunday with whatever the big news topics are next week. And until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.